Oh, hey guys, and welcome back to the My So Called Thoughts podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Sunray. I'm a wife, mama, and musician. And on this podcast, I like to sit down with my microphone and talk about random things that I'm thinking about, just my innermost thoughts, and also just thoughts that I feel like everyone else is thinking, but sometimes we're afraid to talk about them or we don't know how to talk about them. Things we've experienced, things we've gone through in life, and we're just honest here. So, my goal is to talk about these things and talk about how we can move forward in life, how we can heal from the things that we're dealing with and deal with the things that we're healing from. Ooh, it's my third time getting that saying right. So thank you so much for tuning in. Here we are, episode 7. I don't want to waste any time because I want to go right in because I have a few things that I want to get off my chest. So, as you can see the title, Growing Up Feeling Tribeless. I want to talk about feeling tribeless. And, I would like to share, more stories and on this podcast because I feel like a lot of people will be able to resonate with some of the things and stories that I have, and this one in particular. So that's why I want to talk about this stuff. I know sometimes I just rant about certain things, but sometimes I want to share stories because I feel like if I at one point felt alone, I know that somebody out there has got to be feeling the same way or has gone through it. And, sometimes I think about that and it's like, we should talk about it and share. Well, if you didn't know, I'm black. I don't know if you could tell that by the cover art of the podcast. I would, people consider light skinned. I have really long curly hair. Again, you probably already got that from the cover art of the podcast. My hair's always been long, super curly. And I'm technically not mixed. And I'll get into that in a bit. I know I can look at that. Mixed typically means that you have one parent that is one race and another parent of another race. Typically, it's like you have a black parent and then a white parent or things of that nature. To give you an example, my husband is Puerto Rican and I'm black, so our son is mixed. He is black and Puerto Rican. Both my parents are black. My mom had two black parents. My dad had a mixed father, black mother that had some other ethnicities in them, but technically not mixed because, again, that means that you have one parent that is one race and then you have another parent that is another race, and that is not me. But I can see why people may think that I'm mixed based off of my skin tone and like my really long curly hair, which, side tangent, black people can have like long curly hair and of different colors and textures, but that's not the point of today's podcast. But, I have predominantly black features, like my nose, my lips, my eyebrows, things like that. So, and I do want to preface this and say I grew up in the south suburbs of Chicago, the nicer suburbs. We lived in a nice area, but I grew up and I was raised in black culture. I did not grow up around white culture. While I grew up in the suburbs, my family being black, like that was the culture I was raised with. Like I didn't grow up, like obviously I knew things about like other cultures, like, random stereotypes or different things just by having friends and things of that nature. But I just want to say that before I dive into this. So, kind of diving in, my elementary school and my middle school were predominantly black. And, the other kids were Hispanic and white. It was more Hispanics than white. And there were only a few white kids. And of course, there were other ethnicities as well. Most of my friends growing up were of various races. Like I had, black friend. I had one. She was like Japanese, Puerto Rican, and she was black. And then I had an Indian friend growing up, a white friend. So like I had like friends of like every races. I never flocked to my friends because they were a certain race, though. We just, we would join school clubs and certain things that were the same, and that's how friends. I would come about friends. It just happened organically. But growing up, my mom always did my hair in braids because it was just too long. Like my hair was so long that I used to sit on it. Like, I mean, my hair wouldn't like go in the toilet, but like if I were to like sit down, I would sit on my hair. So it was just a lot. And as far as my older sister, she has like more tighter curls. I have hair like my dad, which Like he had like a ponytail in the 90s and then that was over with. But my hair was like always super long, so she just kind of braided it. Um, and growing up, I would, I'd go to school like every little kid, and kids would ask me if I was white, which was weird, and I'll get into that in just a moment. And they would ask, if I was mixed, and it was really weird to me because, and I'm talking about like in elementary school, I'm talking about like 7 or 8 years old. I'm getting asked these questions by other children. And it was weird to me because, one, why did it matter? Like, obviously, as a kid, this is what I'm thinking, like, who freaking cares? And why are you asking me this? Like, I want to go play with my dolls, right? Or I want to go to recess. And two, again, why are children asking these questions? It's just interesting to me. And I'm not I'm not like judging that because, like, kids, they usually regurgitate what they hear. And also, most kids are genuine and innocent and honest. So I'm not saying there's any ill intent behind it, but it's just interesting to me at that age because I didn't understand. Um, and a lot of times, when I would say that I was black, like they wouldn't believe me at all. They'd be like, no, you're mixed though, right? And I would be like, well, technically no, like I don't have a white parent. You know what I mean? And they would say like, but why is your hair so long? And they would ask if I was like Indian, like Native American. They would ask if I was Native American because my hair was so long. And I would just be like, no, I'm just, I'm just who I am, right? And again, it was weird to me because I would be asked these questions, and when I would answer, I wouldn't be believed. And that was again what was so bizarre. Like here I am, 7 or 8, 9 years old, and getting asked these questions by my peers, and no one's believing me, and it's just bizarre. And I wish I could tell you that those type of questions that they ended like in elementary school, like kids were just being curious, right? I wish I could tell you that, but sadly, that is not the case, and that did not happen. Um, as I got older and I got into, middle school, I started straightening my hair because, that's just what, curly hair. I think I talked about this, just about things and fads and how they always changed. I know I talked about it like in my body image podcast, but like curly hair at one point wasn't in. Maybe I'll do a podcast on my journey with my curly hair. I know I say that every episode. You guys are probably like, ugh, annoyed, but I started straightening my hair, and I was becoming a teenager. I didn't want to wear the braids anymore, and it wasn't like my mom wasn't doing like cornrows or anything. Like during the summer, sometimes she would, or French braids, but for the most part, when she would braid my hair, it would be like pigtails. And I was like, oh, I'm 13 now. You know what I mean? I don't want to wear pigtails anymore, which is so stupid. Um, I was like, I didn't want to wear braids forever. And, I started getting even more interesting comments because people were like, oh my God, like, they were convinced I was Native American because my hair was straight. And I would be like, no, I just went and got my hair done. You know what I mean? And they're like, but why is your hair so? Because my hair, it's not, it's like thin, but it's not, it's like fine. I would say it's fine and thin, but I just have a lot of it. So when it's straight, like the texture of it is a little, it's not as, I don't want to say the word coarse, but it's not as thick as most black women's hair. Like my hair is not super thick. I just have a lot of it so it can look thick, but it's more like fine and thin. So people would see my hair texture when it was straight and they would be like, well, there's no way you're black because of the texture of your hair, which is stupid. But anyway, I wasn't popular like at all in school. If anything, I was considered like a brainiac or a nerd because I got really good grades. I did really well in school. And, I also never got into any trouble. I was very quiet. And, most of the time I just kept to myself if I wasn't, talking to my friends and such. Um, and I would get asked a lot by the black kids, why don't you talk? Or why don't you cuss? And when they would say, why don't you talk? I would just kind of be like, I don't know. I don't have anything to say. I mean, I'm just sitting here, like, I'm sitting at my desk listening to the teacher. I'm trying to take notes. When they ask, why don't you cuss? And I would just be like, I don't want to, I mean, again, I'm being asked this by my peers. And, most of the time I really didn't know what to say. And, once I started getting comments like this, I could definitely say that I started to feel like ostracized by, a lot of my fellow black classmates because I didn't understand why I was being asked this stuff. Like I was just being myself. I wasn't trying to be anybody. I was just chilling. And I'm getting asked these comments and then they weren't genuine questions. Like they were kind of condescending in the way that I was, the way that they were asking these questions to me. But I like I said, I did have black friends and I had made friends with a couple of the white girls different in different races like I mentioned earlier, and again, it wasn't on purpose. It was more so we just had like common things, like we would join the art club and student council, just different things that we did together. And that's how, I would make these friends. It just happened organically. And, those kids that like some of the black classmates would ask me the weird questions. It wasn't that I didn't want to be friends with them. It's just that, most of them that did ask me those weird questions, they would look down upon me because I wasn't like them, or that's what they would say, that I was different. And again, it was just weird to me because here I am, just chilling, doing my thing, and I'm being asked these really weird and bizarre questions from my peers. At least at the time, like I didn't understand. I was young. I didn't understand these questions that they were asking of me. And I even used to get asked, like, because fights would break out, and they'd be like, "Why don't you ever fight anybody? Why do you talk like that? Why don't you act black?" Ugh. My least favorite question in the entire universe. The token question. The most stupidest question, to be honest. The weirdest question. If I had $1 for every time somebody asked me, "Why don't you act black?" I would be rich. Filthy, stinking rich. It's insane. And I didn't understand because I just talked normal. I just talked I guess you could say proper. I mean, I don't know. Like, and I was quiet because I'm an introvert naturally. And even when I was younger, I was even more of an introvert. And I'm like an extreme introvert. Um, but why did speaking proper and just being quiet and staying out of trouble, not getting into fights, not cussing, why did that all equate to not being black? Like I would seriously get made fun of because I didn't do those things. And again, I was at at my age, I'm by this time like middle school, I'm 11, I'm 12, 13 years old, and I'm just like, why? I don't understand it. I was black, just like these other kids. And like they were the only ones asking me those questions, asked me why don't I act black? Why didn't and I at the time like why don't they accept me? I'm not different than you, right? Like why did they need to like make me feel so ostracized? And why didn't they want to be my friend? Just because I had acted a little bit different than they did. Look, I think back to middle school, and whenever, one of them would like, because they were kind of the popular ones, like I said, there wasn't really like cliques, but they were more, they were popular. Like I said, the school was predominantly black. I guess you could say popular, like everyone knew them. And if that's what you want to define as popular. But I remember whenever there would be a circumstance when they would like approve of me, like if there was like a group project and the teacher chose everyone and I would say something funny or something and they would laugh too. I like it would make me feel like accepted. Isn't that crazy that I was having these feelings as like I'm a kid, like 12 years old, and I just didn't understand that also like why does being black have to equate to not speaking proper? Like, why can't I just be who I am, but I'm black too? And it was just so strange to me, and it still is to this day. I think it's really silly. This type of behavior and nonsense, it's followed me my whole life. Like I said, I can't express to you how many times I was asked, why do you act white? And you know what made it worse is that I started developing interests that people would consider white, which is stupid. I didn't know that there were interests that only belonged to certain races. Growing up, I started to like punk rock music because my sister was into it. So I was like obsessed. And I had my little emo phase, when I was like 14 years old. I had my little emo phase. Um, and I still love punk rock music to this day. I love it. Like I will jam out to some Blink 182, to some Green Day, to some Paramore. Like I love it. Okay. Like punk rock music is what made me want to play guitar. It's what really sparked my love for music. It's how I developed that passion. So I'm super thankful for it, obviously. And yeah, of course, a lot of those bands that I listened to, they're white, but I didn't like them because they were white. you know, I didn't want to play my guitar because I saw somebody white do it. I'm like, oh, they're white. I want to play guitar. Like I just genuinely loved music, and I love playing the guitar. But you know what? Guess what? I also love R&B music, and I also loved hip hop. You know what I mean? While I was listening to Green Day and Paramore on my, little MP3 player before I got an iPod, before those came out, the next song was Beyonce. The next song was Sierra. But I also loved all music. I mean, except country. I didn't like country growing up. But like I would be listening to Sierra, and then I would switch to My Chemical Romance, and like I was, you know what I mean? I loved it all. And that's just who I was. People, the black kids, they thought I was weird because I liked punk rock music and I would wear a band tee, and stuff like that. And, um, I remember, yeah, my little emo phase, I had the hand warmers, and I remember I was wearing them one day to school and I got made fun of. They were like, "Oh, what is that?" Oh, I just had a memory. I remember I was wearing hand warmers. They were black and they had stars all over them. Oh, I cannot believe it. Just looking back to that, like, what was I doing? And I remember I wore them. They weren't against dress code or anything. And I remember someone made fun of me in gym class for it, and they were like, they said that I looked homeless because homeless people wear hand warmers. When at the time they were just really in, like in the emo and like rock phase. I just had that memory, and it's just crazy. But again, all that stuff, it was just another white thing, quote unquote, that I was doing. And it's so stupid. It really is, to think about. And, when you really think about it, since when do specific races, own what someone can take interest in? Why do we have to judge people in that manner? All this happened to me before I was even an adult. I was young, and I'm a teenager. I'm going through puberty, all this type of stuff, and then I have this to worry about too. And what's sad is that, once again, I didn't grow up in white culture or another culture. I grew up in black culture. I knew and understood the terminology. And if you're black, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I knew the slang, I knew the feuds, the music, the vibes, and I knew what it meant to be black. But because of how I dressed, I was in my like I said, I had my little emo phase in middle school. I had, my graphic tees and my vest, which vests are coming back. But I had my skinny jeans. All I did was wear Converse. I didn't want to wear Nikes or anything. I literally had Converse in every color because of how I dressed, right? How I spoke, just because I spoke proper or whatever. It was assumed I wasn't black enough. And what made it worse is that these people would judge me for not being black enough, but didn't realize how hard the other side was and that I had difficulty on the other side. Not only did I not feel black enough, but I didn't always feel welcomed into other communities because I was black. I always felt that I had to prove myself to other communities and races. I had to prove that, and this sounds like horrible, like I don't agree with this, but like this is what I was going through like at a young age. Because obviously there's a lot of black stereotypes out there. Like I always felt like I had to prove that I wasn't ghetto or loud and just other stupid black stereotypes, which obviously not every black person is like that, and those are just bad stereotypes. But people growing up, that's what they would associate with being black, which is not right at all. Like it I think race stereotypes are unfair. I know that a lot of movies and different things joke about them and comedians and stuff, but I think that in reality, sometimes they aren't, they're not fair. I think it just, I just think stereotypes in general, I think let people show you who they are and that's it, and that's like the end of it. But that's how I would feel. You know what I'm saying? Because you have to think about it. The kids that were judging me at a very young age, they were black and they would say, well, why don't you fight? Why don't you cuss? And pretty much ingraining in my mind that you have to, if you're not doing these things, you're not black. So that when I'm meeting these other races and all this, in other communities, I'm feeling like, I see that they're not cussing and I see that they're not fighting or not doing whatever, the kids told me I needed to do to be black. And I'm wanting to feel accepted by this community. So in turn, I'm thinking, well, they must think that that's what black people are too. It's all so messed up. It's all so messed up. And it's so sad that at a young age, this is what I was experiencing. And this is what I'm told that being black is by my black peers. It's a hot mess, to be honest. It's wrong because not all black people are ghetto and loud or rude. And it's at age 13 or so, I'm like worried about this stuff. I'm being told by my black peers I'm not black because I'm not all those things, and that I shouldn't get good grades, and that I need to cheat on tests, help them cheat, and that I needed to be bad like them. Like that's what I was being told. And like this wasn't just like one or two kids. This was like throughout elementary and middle school and collectives saying this or talking about me behind my back or saying it literally in front of the class so that I could hear it. That type of stuff was going down. And again, on the other side, I'm feeling like I have to prove myself to the other communities that I'm not that, because they would show that, they didn't like certain qualities. They were more quiet or reserved or just whatever. And so in turn, I'm feeling like I don't fit in it anywhere. I will say though that I'm extremely thankful that I did find those friends. Uh, like I said, I had like two black friends, and then they would get made fun of too. The same thing would happen to them. And then of the other races, I'm thankful in elementary school, middle school that I had the few friends I did have, and that I feel like they did get me through it, because if I didn't have friends, I think it would have been a lot tougher. But, every time I met someone new, I always had to feel like I had to prove myself, no matter what race they were. I had to prove myself in some way, shape, or form. I either had to prove my blackness to someone that was black, or I had to prove to somebody of another race that, yes, I'm black, but I'm more than that. And again, why are children having to face these battles? Why? Like, it's gross. It's disgusting. Kids should not have to worry about this type of stuff. I should have just been worried about playing and going to school and getting good grades and listening to my parents. But, unfortunately, this stuff sticks with you. And I can't say that some of these aspects don't still haunt me to this day, because they do. I remember I was at work once, pre-pandemic, and I was talking to one of my coworkers, and she was black, because we had, there was no customers or whatever, and it was we were free at the moment, and we're just chit chatting, and she randomly asked me what I was, because at this time I was new to that location that I was working at, and if you listen to my toxicity in the workplace, this kind of connects with that. I was new to that location, so I was still meeting people, and people were still getting to know me. And, like I said, she randomly asked me what I was, because my hair was super curly. I think I wore it down that day. And I told her I was black. And dun dun dun, she didn't believe me. Here we go again. How old was I? 25? Here we go again. And I'm not shaming her, okay? She was nice. I really liked her. She was cool. But another one of my coworkers who I was really cool with, who he had met my mom because she had came to my job one day. He came. It took him defending me and saying, like, I've met her mom. She's black. I've seen a picture of her dad. Because I had known him for a while, and like I'd shown him like wedding photos. She was convinced I was mixed and had a white parent, and I get it. I do understand. I know the way I look. I know that it wouldn't be hard to guess that I'd have like a straight up like white parent. I know there are a lot of other light skinned women out there that probably get asked the same questions. I know my sister has gotten, questions like that as well. So I really like, I understand it. And I don't think I don't think there's an issue with anyone, like actually just asking the question, like, just honestly. I just think that it's weird that people won't believe you, or the fact that you have to like break down your whole like freaking family tree in order to just explain it to anyone so that they will believe you. And I know that there are circumstances where people may be curious and genuinely interested. I'm not shaming that, because I've seen people before and I'm like, ooh, like I wonder what race they are. They're beautiful or just whatever. So I get it. But at least for me, like that, this wasn't ever the case. Like a lot of times people weren't just being curious and they weren't being genuine. People wouldn't believe me and they would come to their own conclusions about what I was. And I couldn't convince them. And it's just weird. It's weird. This whole feeling of feeling tribeless, it didn't just affect how I dealt with making friends when I was in school, right? Or like the little tiffs I had at work. But it also made me feel insignificant when it came to relationships and dating. I'm married, but growing up, I can't say that I had a specific type. I had more of like a certain personality that I was attracted to or interested in. I had crushes on, guys that were of like every race. It didn't matter. I was more of a personality driven person. Obviously, looks. I do. I did have attraction to certain looks, but it was more of the personality. But I did have my fair share of a white boy that I may have crushed on at the time. And I couldn't help but feel that because I was black, they would never be interested in me. And that would be the only, like, not because of my, looks, not because of my personality, but it was like, oh, I'm black. Mm-mm. Isn't that sad? And I'm talking about like high school. Meanwhile, I also don't, I didn't feel accepted by the black kids at my school because most of the black kids that were making fun of me were boys. For whatever reason, I don't know. The girls made fun of me too, but a lot of times it was boys. Like I mentioned earlier, my husband is Puerto Rican, and we were friends. Well, best friends actually before we started dating. And I didn't really know much about his dating history besides his ex, who wasn't black. And he never did or said anything to like make me feel inferior. Of course, like we were best friends, attached to the hip, and before we started dating. But because of what I dealt with growing up, I was convinced that he would never like me, even though he was dropping signs like crazy. I just thought he was being really nice. I was like, I'm black. Like, he's not going to like a black girl. Again, how sad is this? I know that I cannot be the only girl, woman that has gone through this. Now that I'm an adult, I can't say again that my subconscious doesn't think about these things here and there. I can't help but think in the back of my mind, or feel like I have to prove my blackness to other people. And also in the back of my mind, I'm wondering if white people or other, people of other races are looking at me a certain way because I'm black. It's so tough to say out loud because I'm naturally a welcoming and approachable person, and I've been told that, so I'm not just making my own conclusions, but that's who I am as a person naturally. I'm very nice, but I can't help but think that when people see me, and this is just because, growing up black, you get taught this. You do. You get taught it. Now, whether or not it's right, I mean, I don't agree with it because I think that I'm not trying to go deep here or anything, but MLK, the Dr. Martin Luther King. He said it. He said that, and I'm probably going to butcher it, so forgive me, but I'm pretty sure he said that, he had a dream that people wouldn't be judged by the color of their sin, but of the content of their character. And that's all I ever wanted for myself, was that people would say, they would look at me and say, oh, she seems nice, I want to talk to her. And you know what? That's probably what most people think. But when you grow up in this environment where this stuff is happening to you, you can't help but think in your mind, they just see a black girl. Which, so what? You know what I mean? But again, when you're growing up in that environment in school and your peers, they make you feel that being black is associated with only one thing. I had to, what's the word I'm thinking of? I had to, deconstruction. I had to, deconstruction. I had to deconstruct my mind to believing this stuff. But it's hard because when you receive it at such a young age, it's difficult to kind of let that go, right? I've met and worked with people of all different cultures, especially at my last job. I've met so many different people. I've talked to so many different people who spoke different languages that have been here, that people that lived in Europe, people that lived in this country. I've been able to meet amazing people. And, in certain environments, I haven't always felt like this. I will say that at my last job, it was full of diversity and everyone was so welcoming. That was just the culture, It was just the culture. So I'm thankful for environments like that never made me feel insignificant for who I was. That will say that, and I've talked about it in the toxicity in the workplace podcast, that job that I won't name, I will say it was awesome with the diversity and making me feel accepted, and no matter what I looked like, because it was so diverse, and I'm happy about that and super thankful. That's why I have so much respect for that company. Um, so like I said, I haven't always felt like this, but again, it's always in the back of my mind. I try to push it away, and I wonder if it'll ever go away, because I don't want it there. That feeling like you don't belong to any tribe, feeling tribeless. It makes you feel alienated. It makes you feel isolated. It makes it hard to meet people and to trust people. And, I mean, I felt like my own best friend, my now husband, could never like me. And for what? And where did that even come from? I don't know. Did it come from what I was hearing, as I was a young girl? I don't remember, directly, you know, in my brain how I was receiving these things in the moment. Like I said, I just thought it was weird. But, at some point I was told, that someone of another race wouldn't like a black girl. Like I said, I don't know where it came from, but at some point it came in that, way or fashion. I don't remember who exactly told me that, but someone had to have told me that. Or, I've also had negative experiences that could have, influenced that, where maybe I liked a white boy and he probably made fun of me or something stupid. So, it ended up psychologically messing with my mind. But it's just sad. It's sad. But I will say, because, we always gotta go positive somewhere on this podcast, but I try to keep my head up. And it's hard because I'm naturally an introvert. I've always been this way. And I try to put myself out there. I really do. I try to not come with preconceived notions that I think that people will have about me. And I try to believe that, you know, everyone has the capacity to be loving and accepting unless they show you otherwise, right? And of course, if they show you that, then distance yourself, do whatever you got to do. My goal and my hope is to raise our son to know who he is on both sides, both Black and Puerto Rican, and to raise him in a community that's loving and accepting of all ethnicities and cultures. I don't want him to feel insignificant about who he is on either side. I want him to love who he is on both sides, and I refuse to let him feel tribeless. Because I look back and I just think about it, and it's just sad. Like little 7-year-old me just not thinking that she was black enough. And you know what? Like it's sad because I know that other people and other, black women have experienced this, and it's sad because when you have people pushing this down your throat at a young age, it's hard because it's like, then what am I then? You know? It's like I know the black culture. I have everything that needs to be black. Got the freaking skin color. Why am I not enough? I just really hope that children, these days are not dealing with this. I mean, you never know. I mean, as far as like growing up, I went to school in like, the 2000s, early 2000s and stuff. But I just hope that kids are not dealing with this because everyone deserves to feel loved and accepted. And there's not one way to be one race. Black does not equal this. Yeah, there may be some stereotypes. Every race has their stereotypes, but that should not dictate anything. And you can't tell someone that they don't act black and they don't act this just because they talk proper and they get good grades and all this type of stuff, just like how I was. But again, like I said, I move forward and I try to be positive. And if you can relate, I think the key is to just, surround yourself with loving and accepting people. Outside of what I faced in school, I met 3 of my best friends that I've had since middle school, and we're all different races again. And, totally coming from different cultures too. And these are different than the friends I mentioned earlier. These are friends that I met at my church growing up, and, we've held on to each other for years, over a decade. And I'm super thankful that they always made me feel accepted. Always. Because I will say that growing up, like the friends that I did meet at school, like while, we had, commonalities and I was friends with them, I still kind of, a little part of me always wanted to feel like accepted by them. I remember, and I don't know, this may be irrelevant, but one of my white friends growing up, and this is something random, but it just, I think about it when I'm talking about this and, just acceptance and stuff. I had this friend that um, she was white, and we were really good friends. And like we had sleepovers, everything. And I don't know, like I would go over her house, and I don't know if her mom like didn't like me. I never got the vibe, but then like one day, like I'll never forget it. She called me and told me that we couldn't be friends anymore, and she was crying on the phone. And it was weird because I didn't get it. Like she wouldn't give me an explanation. She wouldn't tell. And at this time we were like in 7th grade, I think. And she wouldn't tell me why. Like if there was a specific reason as to why we couldn't be friends. And it obviously at like 13 years old, like you can tell someone, It's not like we were young, but I always looked back at that and I always wondered if her mom didn't like me or anything. But this is, maybe I'm wrong. And maybe, me being black had nothing to do, you know what I'm saying, with it. But again, this feeling of not knowing if you're accepted by by other races and also, not being accepted by your own people per se, I couldn't help but think, I wonder if that was the reason. It probably wasn't. I mean, maybe, her mom just didn't like me, or maybe there was something, or maybe who knows, right? But again, when you're going through not feeling accepted anywhere, your first thought is, I wonder if it's because I'm black. Isn't that messed up? Again, like it's trash. It's horrible. Why was I thinking this stuff? And it was only because of what I was being fed, It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. But I didn't mean to go off on that tangent, but it just gives you an example that, like, again, I was thinking that because of that. But now that I'm away, going back to talking about my three best friends. I'm away from them in a new state. It's been hard to find, new community, right? Outside of our family that we have here. But it's something I'm working on. And with that, again, like because I'm searching for new community and things of that nature, I have to remind myself, like, don't think the way that, you grew up thinking and what was pushed on you at a young age. Find a community no matter what. If they like you or whatever, then they'll accept you, and it has nothing to do with your race at all. You know, I guess all I can do is try and, believe that everything will work out. And I do. I'm not stressed out about it. But, again, if you could relate, I think the best thing that we could do is we just have to know that our validation doesn't come from what others think about us and what they think about our race and what they think that they know about us or anything like that. It doesn't come from that. For me as a believer, I believe that my validation comes from God. And it's sad that the younger version of me, it obviously I went to church growing up, but I didn't understand that concept. And I thought that my validation came from what others perceived about me, what they perceived about what my race may or may not be. And since it doesn't come from what others think about us or what they think they know about us, again, whether it's related to ethnicity or not, we just have to push forward. And, if you find that community and those friendships, then they're genuine, you know? It's not about race or anything like that. Find people that love you for who you are, for the content of your character. I think that that's so important. Because at the end of the day, who you love, who your friends are, it shouldn't be based on race. My three girlfriends I talked about, we all became friends because we were on the dance team at church. And we just cleaned together because we had to go to practices and different things. And our commonality was dance. We were Christian. It had nothing to do with race. And we've been able to stay in touch and be friends for over a decade. And, we all love each other. We're all adults now, busy with life, marriages and kids. So it's hard. And some of us are in other states. But that's what's important. Friendships and relationships and feeling accepted, it shouldn't have anything to do with race. It should have to, do with having the things in common, like I mentioned. Believe in the same things. You hold the same values. You have love for one another. That's what's important. And, obviously I can't undo the past. I can't undo what I went through. And like I said, sometimes I have those thoughts again of feeling tribeless and just like I don't belong anywhere because of the things that I faced at a young age. But at the end of the day, I push it to the back of my mind. I move forward. I'm nice to everyone. And I will do my best to believe the best in people. That's all I can do. And we just have to raise the next generation better. Like, I will teach my son to love who he is no matter what anyone says. That being black is not one thing. Being Puerto Rican is not one thing. You are you, and you are enough, and you are valid in who you are. And your validation and the real true acceptance comes from the Lord, period. We just have to do our best. And I've seen those little videos of, I think I saw something on Facebook of like this white kid. It was like twin day or something, and I don't know. And one of his little best friends was this black kid, and he was like, "Oh, he's my twin. We both wore gray shirts today, and we both like cars." And I love that, and that's what should happen. He believed that they were twins because they're both wearing gray shirts and they both like cars, so that's what they did for Twin Day or something like that. I might be butchering that, but I'm sure you may have heard something like that. And that's beautiful. The black kid feels accepted, the white kid, you know what I'm saying? It's just crazy that, race comes in and it can be divisive. And I just think that people don't want to talk about that. And again, I'm really not trying to get on a tangent about race, but I just think it's important to touch on Because why did I have to go through all of what I went through when it's all complete nonsense? Absolute nonsense. You know, there's no one way to be black. There's no one way to be any race. Who you are is who you are. It doesn't take away from your experience and your culture as that race. And that's the bottom line. You know, at the end of the day, it's 2022 is 21st century. Why does being black mean one thing? You know, crickets. But I really wanted to share this story because I've heard it so many times before. One of my favorite YouTubers, Kelly Stamps, she's talked about it before, of being called like an Oreo, black on the outside, white on the inside. And it's just silly just because she has certain interests in different things. But she's never denied who she is, and she's never said that she wasn't black. You know what I'm saying? It's like she never said she wasn't black or anything like that. So it's just crazy. But I think that the best thing that we can do is just be who we are, find good community, find better friendships, and whoever doesn't accept you, who cares? It has nothing to do with you feeling validated in your race and in who you are. If you're Indian and you say, I've been ostracized or whatever, you're still Indian, but it doesn't define who you are either. It's just a part of you. Or if you're white or this, or you're Filipino or whatever, yeah, that's your culture, but it doesn't define you. It's who you are. It's a part of you, but you can be whoever you want to be. And that's kind of the bottom line. No one should have to feel tribeless. And most importantly, no one should have to grow up feeling this either. That's the bottom line, is that there's no reason why I should have grew up, not feeling accepted by black people, but then also not feeling accepted by other cultures, just based off of what I was fed growing up my entire life. So, we just got to be positive and move forward, like I said. But thank you for listening to this story. It's one that I really wanted to talk about and share because I know there are others out there that have experienced this. And if you made it to the end of the podcast, thank you so much. Thank you for hearing me and hearing my story. I hope that if you have gone through this, that you have recovered from it like I have, or at least that you have your eyes and you have your eyes and your mind set on something positive, and knowing that the goal is just to find good community and good relationships and friendships and skip everybody else. You are who you are, feel valid in who you are. And like I said, especially being a believer, my validation, comes from God, and that's what's most important. But thank you again. If you made it to the end of the podcast, please share it with a friend or so. Just know, of course, I forgot to mention this at the beginning. The podcast is available on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course, YouTube. Please leave a comment or a review on your platform of choice and subscribe on your platform of choice. Also follow on Instagram. The Instagram page is at my so-called thoughts pod. Again, that's at my so-called thoughts pod. So thank you again. Little prayer at the end of this podcast. I pray that if you have experienced this, then you will feel valid in who you are. And I pray that whatever you may be going through, that you find the strength and the wisdom to get through it. And that if you're not having a good day while you're listening to this podcast, I pray that your day turns around and gets better. In Jesus' name. But thank you so much again for listening. I hope you are well and you're thriving wherever you are. And once again, this is Sunray. I'm out. Peace.